an intense, traumatic day yesterday. And Vicky Ward, for those who've been watching Left Hook, they know one of our favorite guests. She is a reporter who has been covering Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell for over 20 years. She wrote a Vanity Fair article where she actually got Jeffrey Epstein's survivors, the Farmer sisters, on the record. And at the last second, when she thought she had done the work and survived the threats by Jeffrey Epstein, she thought it was going to get published. The Farmer sisters thought it would get published. Vanity Fair got bullied. And voila, all that information got excised at the last second. Instead, it became a puff piece. But Vicky kept at it. She also was at the trial. Ghislaine Maxwell. It's an what would you call it? An audio documentary?
Well, we made a podcast series called Chasing Ghislaine, and we filmed the making of that. And so 6 months later, there was a 3-part documentary on Discovery Plus, and they're both called Chasing Ghislaine. But the Audible podcast series was the intellectual property for the documentary that followed.
It's called Chasing Ghislaine, and then also right behind her to her left, you see her best-selling book that she co-wrote with James Patterson, The Idaho 4, which is a fantastic book. Very sad book, another tragic story about the murders and the radicalization of young men and the incel movement and what's happening in America's heartland. And then she has the book. You're allowed to say the book you're working on right now?
Yeah, yes. I'm writing about the murder of the United Health CEO, Brian Thompson, and by the alleged murderer, Luigi Mangione. And for obvious reasons, that's a fascinating topic that I think we can all relate to.
As you can see, Vicky loves the lighthearted, sugary tales of escapism. And so yesterday, folks, when the latest tranche, if you will, of emails exchanges were released by House Democrats and Republicans with a lot of salacious content, I thought, got to talk to Vicky. So, Vicky, I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've read it. Your response to what you saw yesterday, which was specifically these correspondences between Epstein, Ghislaine, Epstein and Michael Wolff, and more is drip, drip, drip coming out. Lauren Summers, gosh, some gross stuff there. Also Peter Thiel, some more gross stuff there. And also the fact that it seems that according to Jeffrey Epstein and these emails, Donald Trump really knew Jeffrey Epstein, hung out with these girls and partied with these girls. A lot to talk about. I'll let you spin the wheel. Where do you want to begin first?
Well, in a way, Ward, let's not begin with Trump, because that is a long conversation. But, let's just talk about Larry Summers, whom I know quite well, and a lot of other high-profile names. Catherine Rummeler, attorney for the Obama White House, currently the general counsel for Goldman Sachs. You mentioned Peter Thiel. What are all these people doing on these kind of stupid, to put it kindly, I mean, kind of tasteless and crude, to put it less kindly? What are they doing having water cooler kind of crappy gossip, chit chat with Jeffrey Epstein? Why do they even give this man the time of day? What is it about him that's so valuable to them? I mean, why is Larry Summers wasting time asking Jeffrey Epstein, first of all, for advice about a woman in London? I mean, whatever. But wasting time asking Epstein questions about Trump taking cocaine. What is Kathy Rummeler doing, going back and forth? Why does anybody care about Epstein's view of the impeachment hearings? I mean, I'm scratching my head. The guy can't spell. The guy can't be bothered to learn how to spell. And all my reporting, I know Donald Trump. I met with him quite often before he ran for political office.
I'm sorry.
I then what?
I said I'm sorry.
Right, but so and as I've also known Jeffrey Epstein in a different context. I've reported around the Trump first campaign. I know Steve Bannon quite well. I know Michael Wolff. I know all the people in this universe, and nothing ever suggested to me that post 2008, 8, so 2008 is when I first met Trump. Nothing ever suggested to me that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein spoke. And yet the way Jeffrey Epstein presents himself to all these people, including he wanted us to believe, some Russian dignitary, he has the inside track on Trump. But the reality is very different, Woj. And so, that's why, because one of the things I think it's important to put into perspective when we talk about all of this is context. Because a lot of people are looking at these emails and they're saying, well, clearly Trump knew more about what was going on with Epstein than he let on. I think that seems unquestionably true. But I think the other thing that you have to do is look at the time that some of these emails were sent, and then draw back and look at what was going on with the Epstein story or the Trumps, at the same time. So the email that Jeffrey Epstein sends to Ghislaine Maxwell about Trump being the dog that didn't bark, and that he'd spent, a long afternoon or whatever it was in the house with him, and with a victim whose name is redacted, but the White House has said it's Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah.
And Maxwell says, well, that's interesting. Okay, so to me, the thing that's noticeable about that noteworthy is 2011, the date of it. Because 2011 is when the name Virginia Roberts first entered the public domain. It's when she gave her very first interview with, I think, the Mail on Sunday. And the Mail on Sunday published the photograph of Virginia with Ghislaine Maxwell, with Prince Andrew. And so I think in that context, and at that moment in time, obviously Epstein had done his time in jail, but Virginia Roberts hadn't yet been roped into any of she hadn't joined any of the class action lawsuits. And I think what's interesting about that is that it feels like to me is that Epstein and Maxwell are sort of saying to each other, is Trump going to, speak up and drop us in it? And what we do know, in fact, was going on behind the scenes was that Trump was being helpful to the lawyers of the defense was being helpful to Brad Edwards, was trying to get ahead of this story, saying, no, don't bother subpoenaing me. I'll tell you whatever you need to know about Jeffrey Epstein. So now I think it's worth asking the question, was Trump doing that because he thought that the only way to beat this story was to get ahead of it and play nice with an attorney who might otherwise come across stuff about him that was damning? That's what I think we might be about to find out.
That he proactively threw Epstein under the bus in order to protect himself. And even Epstein himself was a bit shocked, but at the same time was very skeptical.
Who knows if he knew? He must have known at some point But who knows if in 2011 he may not have known that Trump had sat down and been interviewed
Mm,
by Brad Edwards, who became Virginia Giuffre's first attorney. And you see them both there clearly. He and Ghislaine Maxwell kind of wondering aloud to each other, saying, "Have you noticed this?
yep.
What is, where is Trump in all this?" And so I think that is, and then I think the reference to the Florida police officer is curious, and 75%. I mean, Michael Wolff has always said to me that Epstein, that Michael has wondered if it was Trump who turned on Epstein,
Mm.
who went to the Palm Beach cops and said, "Take this man." And some part of me, when I saw that email and then the reference to the Palm Beach police chief, thought, well, maybe there's something in that. And then I but I don't know. I think the other thing, Woj, that's pretty interesting is that, I do know from my own reporting around the first Trump administration that the relationship between, Epstein, I think, was desperate to get close to Steve Bannon. And I think that that's pretty important to remember, because if Epstein had been close to Trump, he wouldn't have needed to be close to Steve Bannon. And he tried to get close to Steve Bannon. I think they only met after Bannon left the White House. But having met Jeffrey Epstein and unfortunately having had to deal with him, it strikes me when I read his emails trashing Trump that there must be really bad blood for whatever reason between these two, because he almost comes across as obsessed with Trump and plays up a relationship that's really been cold for many, many years in order to leverage, Jeffrey Epstein. But it's sort of like an obsession. I mean, it seemed to me. And I did wonder, what really went down between these two guys? Because whatever went down, it was bad.
Yeah, it was really bad. And, another one of these emails that perhaps reveals why that relationship soured is an email a bit in 2019, dated January 2019, sent to Michael Wolff, where Epstein said of Trump, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop." Uh, what is that all about? And unfortunately, I think I know what that's about, but I'll let you take the crack.
Well, again, and I haven't, there's reporting that I want to do around this, but I have already reported that, Trump definitely became very friendly with a woman, one of the Epstein survivors, a woman named Anushka DeGiorgio, and Trump invited Anushka to his wedding to Melania Trump, and he met Anushka through Ghislaine Maxwell, and it was reported in the British press. They all went off to Mar-a-Lago for a weekend, and then it was reported that Anushka was housed, back by Trump back in New York. Now, Anushka was one of the 4 victims who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell at her criminal trial, and she was also the person who, when the Epstein survivors all gathered on Capitol Hill recently to sort of lobby Congress, she was the first one to get up there and speak. And so, again, my mind spinning, knowing all of this and knowing that Anushka certainly has a lot of ill will towards Ghislaine Maxwell.
Mm.
And Jeffrey Epstein, and knowing that she and Donald Trump remained good friends, one does have to. I mean, the idea that Trump could not know about what, not just what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, but Ghislaine Maxwell's role in all this, given
Absolutely.
his friendship with Anushka DeGiorgio, is sort of defies belief. So to me, I'm thought, aha. I mean, the interesting thing about that email, Woj, is it's both good and bad for Trump, right? Because on the one hand, he's telling Ghislaine Maxwell to stop, but on the other hand, he knows, and he has said he didn't know.
And furthermore, Virginia Giuffre's memoir was released recently, and Donald Trump referred to her as property. When it was asked when he was in the European tour, he was asked about Jeffrey Epstein, and he said, what was the falling out over? And he said, he's still property from me. And the property in question seemed to be a woman, a girl, Virginia Giuffre, who was an employee at the time. Her father had worked for Mar-a-Lago for a long time. Ghislaine Maxwell saw her reading a book, approached her, and then I think it's safe to say groomed her, took her, lied to her, lured her over false pretenses of, helping her career. She goes to Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein, according to Virginia Giuffre's own word, passed her around like a platter of fruit to very powerful men. The memoir mentions Andrew by name, but there's other folks. And I think this is interesting. Before we talk about Trump and the cabal of men here, like I think it is important. Like why Larry Summers? You knew this man was a convicted pedophile. Like it wasn't right. Like it's not like in 2008, 2009, nobody knew. Everyone knew who he was. Lawrence Summers, like sending emails to him talking about girls and advice. There's Peter Thiel. There's all these other professors, Pinker, I think from Harvard. Like all these people are perfectly fine with this guy. And then you had Prince Andrew, and I think the there is the fact that there are a lot of powerful men who have escaped accountability. Virginia Giuffre mentioned a prime minister of a country. And then 2 days ago, I don't know if you saw, a drop site released emails that showed that Ehud Barak's aide just happened to stay at Jeffrey Epstein's house, just totally normal. And Ehud Barak has openly been photographed coming to the Epstein apartment. Whoopsie. And then even the Prince Andrew of it all, the fact, I just want to stick on this for a second because here's another email that came out in March 2011. 4 months after he claimed to have ended his relationship with Epstein, former Prince wrote to him and Maxwell saying, quote, "I can't take any more of this," in response to allegations in the Daily Mail, right? That you mentioned, that Virginia Giuffre came out. It was in 2011. In another email from Epstein in 2011, it appears to corroborate the veracity of the photograph of then Andrew holding Virginia Giuffre by the waist in 2001 when she was 17. In the email, Epstein said, quote, "Yes, she was on my plane. And yes, she had her photo taken with Andrew, as many of my employees have." Now, Vicky, I want to repeat. This was 2011. I'm an English major. Let me just do the math. 14 years. It took 14 years for Andrew to have his title stripped right before Virginia Giuffre's memoir dropped. And we've known about this for 14 years. That just builds a type of bile in my throat. I, I
Well,
mean,
I know. Well, I mean, so just to give you the whole story, Waj, because people don't necessarily put all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together because it was a complicated story. So 2011, Virginia gave that first interview to the Mail on Sunday, and they had the picture, and then, believe it or not, it just went away. But then what happened? It went away, and why did it go away? Because the British tabloids, if you remember, weren't having their finest hour in terms of believability. I mean, you have to remember the whole, the cell phone, people were, what do you call it? There was a whole trial with them, not involving the Mail, but involving the Murdoch newspapers, who were hacking people's phones. So for all sorts of reasons, that story sort of disappeared. But then Virginia puts her name to a class action suit with the other Epstein victims who have filed a complaint because Epstein's plea deal was done illegally, as in they were not notified of it, which by law it's not supposed to happen. So she joins the class action suit at the end of 2014. So her story and the photograph of her with Prince Andrew, and this time she adds there are other names that she starts to mention. The end of 2014, beginning of 2015, this becomes a bigger story. This time, the story, it's in the Mail, but it goes viral. Everyone around the world starts to pay attention. And this actually is the beginning of the end for both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, because publicly, I mean, the first time round in 2011, they didn't react. And the story went away. In 2015, Maxwell reacted. Epstein's preferred way of dealing with this was to offer to pay all the legal fees of all the other guys she'd mentioned, like Senator George Mitchell. Alan Dershowitz was one. I mean, they then went on. Dershowitz refused to let Epstein pay his legal bills, and he and Virginia had a long, protracted legal battle in which, at the end of it, Virginia Giuffre said she might have been wrong to have accused Dershowitz. I mean, that went on for years. But the reason it mattered was because Maxwell turned around and publicly called Virginia a liar. And that was the beginning of the end, because then Virginia Roberts sued Ghislaine Maxwell for defamation. And it's all the back and forth, the discovery in that civil lawsuit, which was ultimately settled. But the back and forth in all of that, the discovery, became the backbone in the criminal lawsuit, first against Jeffrey Epstein, and then when he died, against Ghislaine Maxwell. So anyway, so it's sort of against that storyline that one tries to put all these emails that are now coming out. You know, you try to like look back, or you do if you're me, and see what was going on and where these emails fit in. I mean, I will tell you, I mean, it seems clear to me that, I mean, in as much as Michael Wolff was using Epstein, possibly for a book or whatever reason, Epstein was trying to use Michael Wolff, because unlike Epstein, Michael Wolff really was sitting in the White House with his notebook out. I mean, I remember the stories when Michael was reporting his first book about the Trump White House. He would just, I mean, it was back then, it was so disorganized that he would kind of sit there in the hallway with his notebook out, and everyone would come and go and just tell him everything. It was like a sieve. And so in a weird way, clever of Epstein to attach himself to Michael, and then clever of Epstein to attach himself to Bannon, and then clever of Epstein to go out to the rest of the world and make it seem as if he had the inside track on Trump, when in fact the two men hadn't spoken for, well over 10 years. I mean, it's you do see how, a lot of bullshit in a certain circle seems to get you very far.
And the fact is, you mentioned something, and I want to ask about this Michael Wolff email and your thoughts on this. And I had Michael on 3 days ago. And the person who connected us was, thank you for connecting us back in the day. I've had him on 3 times. And the reason why I had Michael on is because he has this counter lawsuit, this anti-SLAPP suit, where he wants to depose Melania and Donald Trump. And for those who haven't followed that story, in about the middle of October, Michael Wolff alleged that the first time Donald and Melania had sex was on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet, the Lolita Express. The fact that everyone knew that his private jet was Lolita Express and no one said anything. Anyway, the more I think about this, the more it just causes me like rage and disgust. But I digress. Uh, so Melania Trump and Donald Trump allegedly had sex on Lolita Express the first time, which then begs many questions. Well, Melania, how does she know Ghislaine? How does she know uh, Jeffrey Epstein, right? And then Michael alleged that it was Jeffrey Epstein who said, "Oh yeah, the first time they had sex was on my plane," and Melania Trump came out and threatened to sue Michael with a $1 billion defamation suit. And so Michael then did a counter and has raised to this point, I think, $800,000. And he said when he was on the show about 3 days ago that he has already retained a law firm. I think the GoFundMe page has 800,000, and he wants to depose Ghislaine, Donald, and Melania, and get a lot of back history, especially when it comes to Melania, and ask her questions about her relations to Epstein and Ghislaine that she refuses to answer. Now, that's where Michael is. I interviewed him 3 days ago. I've emailed him yesterday, Vicky. Once I read these emails, hasn't responded back to me because I do want to ask him, the role of the reporter, the role of the journalist.
Mm.
You've been inside, you've talked to these people, and there's one of these emails, and I just want your take on this, where Epstein, like you said, is now using Michael Wolff. It's December 2015. This is very important because Donald Trump is running for president at this time. And, Epstein asked him, well, how would you respond? What would you do? And Wolf says, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. Just your response to that exchange.
Well, where do we even begin? where, where do we even begin? Um, so that's 2015, right? 2015. So the
Yes.
first Trump campaign. So I do know from my own reporting, from Sam Nunberg, who was in the room with Trump, was Trump, along with Roger Stone, was Trump's first sort of political advisor, that when this story bubbled up because of Virginia Roberts' picture with Andrew, the name Epstein, and because Trump in the past had said, yeah, Jeff, great girl, that he did wonder aloud how to play this. And from what I'm told, it was a relatively quick conversation because, according to Sam Nunberg, he said, well, I haven't spoken to Epstein for years. I chucked him out of Mar-a-Lago. But Hillary Clinton, the Clintons have, for them, Epstein is much more problematic. And I think if you remember, Virginia Giuffre did mention Bill Clinton's name back in 2015, not claiming anything nefarious, but his name was there, whereas Donald Trump's was not. So, but go back to what you asked me about. So the fact that Epstein is then asking Michael as to what he should do. Well, I mean, on one level, I hate to say this, the whole thing's absurd because Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, other than Michael, and then it turns out through the emails, this guy, Landon Thomas, who I think left the New York Times quite some time ago, Jeffrey Epstein was not big on talking to journalists for reasons that are perhaps self-evident. So the idea that he would be on, he would be going to the media to explain his relationship with Trump is kind of funny. I mean, this strikes me, this whole conversation is what I call a waste of time. But then for Michael to, Michael's response, well, in the nicest possible way, because I've known Michael a long time. I mean, the whole thing is just garbage.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know I know you know him. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I read these emails. I thought, I mean, I mean,
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
all of us did,
you know,
Vicky. I
I
think
mean,
all of us were
I
like, ugh,
yeah, yeah.
ugh.
I'm like, oh my God, you know. I mean, I'm sure what Michael would say is that, you know, he at one point he was definitely thinking of writing a book about Jeffrey Epstein. And I think, you know, there is unquestionably value in that, it turns out. I mean, I think probably then publishers would have queried that, but it turns out there is value in that. And the fact that Michael is really the only journalist who had access to Epstein pretty much daily for the last 5 years of his life is good. But you see there that the very dangerous, slippery slope that, you know, journalists ideally should not go down when dealing with someone like this, because in order to keep the access and keep the relationship going, you find yourself in positions like this, answering kind of stupid questions about a hypothetical situation that's never going to happen and giving kind of stupid answers. And when conversations like this then become public and you and I are looking at them, it's embarrassing for many, many reasons. Um, but, you know, but Michael is a grown up and I'm sure he will, you know,
Yeah,
but
no, no.
it's embarrassing because the hideous of Jeffrey Epstein, you know, you're not
Yeah.
just talking about like a white collar criminal. You're talking about the level of the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein is kind of beyond anything we've seen, and the depravity. And so that's, I think, what makes this really uncomfortable to read.
Yeah, I'll give my take on this real quick before we move on because you know, it is a topic of conversation, something I've been thinking about. I listened to Michael yesterday when he explained himself on the Daily Bean podcast that he does, and his co-host also had much like yours. He goes, this was a pedophile. There's like, you know, there's a reporter,
Yeah.
there's a journalist, and also because this went up above and beyond reporting, transcribing, being friendly, and also then just being a consigliere, like an advisor, a coacher, and not just a coach to anyone, but like you said, one of the most notorious, horrific pedophiles. And it goes back to the overarching theme, Vicky, that I think you started with, is that so many people who should have known better were so comfortable being so friendly and chummy with a man who raped girls and trafficked girls. And, you know, they saw him as a means to some end. Maybe it was a means to a book deal. Maybe it's a means to, you know, get the bigger story, which is capture all the bigger fish. Maybe it's the means to bring down Donald Trump, right? But nonetheless, the kind of casual familiarity that people had, even after this man was convicted on a sweetheart deal and spent what 6 out of the 7 days out of jail raping girls, right? It's just the overall big picture is how complicit everyone seemed to be in the normalization and rehabilitation of Epstein, and how he used people and they used him. And
Right.
that
And
type
the
of
great question is why? Because I mean, look, I do understand because Michael has told me in interviews like this one that for him the value of hanging around Jeffrey Epstein and sort of sucking up to him in this kind of ghastly way was that he would go to Epstein's house and, you know, according to Michael, he didn't see any young girls, but he did get to see, you know, Bill Gates and all sorts of extraordinary global thinkers, and you know, and that for a journalist was, you know, was catnip. Um, but I mean, my head is like, I mean, I just fail to see of what use Jeffrey Epstein really is to somebody like Larry Summers or Peter Thiel or Catherine Rummeler. I mean, you know, please.
yeah.
Um,
And especially once you knew, and like, why are you asking him advice about girls, Larry Summers? You're a grown ass man asking a pedophile advice about women. And it goes back to something that you said, like, reading his emails, typos everywhere, doesn't know how to form a coherent sentence, nothing really of depth, seems pretty stupid. You know, I'm not impressed. If this was this brilliant man who Leslie Wexner and Leon Black, these billionaires, entrusted with their entire financial portfolio, color me unimpressed, Vicky.
No. Well, and actually, you raised something interesting. I have been going through them, and I'm a little behind because, as you mentioned, I had a personal matter to deal with yesterday. But I'm yet to see Leon Black's name. I have to believe if we get the whole files, they, there'll be emails with him. And I haven't yet seen much about Wexner. But what I did see, going through them very quickly last night, and there's so many documents. There are kind of like these idiots' guide to taxes. Like when Trump comes into office, there's like Epstein's accountant, Richard Kahn, sends him like 10-page briefing on how the tax laws are likely to change. And I did scratch my head and thought, so this is what Leon Black supposedly paid $170 million for the 10-pager that Epstein's accountant prepared for him on tax policy under Trump. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, in a way, these emails reveal, a lot. But one of the things they reveal is that for all these supposedly masters of the universe are completely stupid.
Yes.
They turn out to be.
Yeah, just like socially inept, not that bright, reckless, for these alleged, men gifted by God or genes who are supposed to be our overlords. And I'm sure, Vicky, you and I have been in the game for a long time. You as a woman, I'm sure the misogyny is rampant. People underestimate women. Michelle Obama talked about it, as a black girl, growing up, she had to like, you always think, okay, I have to work harder, I have to be better, I have to be smarter than everyone. Then she was in these rooms with these privileged men, when Obama was president. She said, oh, I realize these people aren't that bright. And then me as a brown man, as a Muslim man, as a child of immigrants, same thing. And then you go there and you go in these august rooms and spaces, and you're like, oh, these brilliant people are saying really stupid stuff. I mean, like, it's like, is this a one-off? And then you go again and again and again. You're like, nope, this is how they all are. Wow. And you're seeing this mediocrity, but also this recklessness, carelessness, this cavalierness, and this dehumanization of women. I think that's another recurring theme. What seems to be forgotten, Virginia, Vicky, time and time again, is there were girls, and people just are like, eh, that's fine. And one of these girls, Virginia, seems that her story and her ghost is coming back to haunt these men from the grave and bring them down. And that's the one thing that they have been unable to bury are the girls who got attacked, who were raped. And some of them who became survivors and are now women, and Virginia Giuffre, who seems to have kickstarted all of this, who it seems everywhere they turn away from, try to escape it, Virginia Giuffre's ghost comes and says, "Nope, let me take you back to Epstein." Your take on what we will still discover and how the story of, let's just say, Virginia can still bring down a lot of these powerful men.
Well, I've got to tell you what, I'm much more hopeful today than I have been this past year that actually this whole house of cards is about going to come tumbling down. I think there's a lot of really damning stuff in what we've just read.
Absolutely.
And if we get the whole files and all these emails, I mean, the emails are what's particularly, I think, important and revealing. I think, for the first time, I certainly can see why Donald Trump doesn't want the world to get a good look at what's on Jeffrey Epstein's computer. And I had been scratching my head about that till now. I think we now see, oh, well, maybe I do believe, it's interesting that Virginia Roberts absolutely, said nothing but nice things about Trump. And I've never heard any of the Epstein victims. I didn't meet Katie Roberts under her pseudonym, but Trump is not one of the names that has been bandied around. But it does seem as though, for Trump to kind of hedge behind, I had no idea what Epstein was really doing, is going to become a line that may become very, very, very hard for him to stand behind with any kind of straight face. And his base cares passionately about this.
Absolutely.
It's not just the Democrats, and it's not just, human beings, or it's Trump's base. So that's going to be interesting. But I mean, there are a lot of people in positions of power who are very, very embarrassed today. And I don't think the story's even really begun to take off. So I think, in a way, this is what we've been waiting for, because we wanted to understand the system of abuse, because this didn't happen just because of one man's sick proclivities, right?
Yep.
And one woman's. This was enabled by a system, and what we're beginning to see is who was in that system and how it worked. So I think that's a good day for democracy.
I think, and I completely agree with you. I think we're at the drip, drip, drip phase. We're not even at the flood phase. Folks, it's such a big deal. And Vicky knows this. She's originally British. If Andrew or anyone has their titles stripped, it is a huge deal. And Virginia Giuffre, a week before her book was published, they stripped Andrew of his title. Can you just, if you can, for us ignorant Americans, talk to us about how that's such a big deal and why there's a there when it comes to the allegations that Prince Andrew spent 14 years, demonizing Virginia Giuffre, spending all this, this attack ads on her, right? Dehumanizing her, calling her a liar. And then a week before her memoir comes out, she gets stripped. He gets stripped of his titles.
Well, it's a very, very big deal. So, you have to remember that in England, so the British taxpayers essentially pay for the British royal family, which is why it's so important that they appear to be upstanding people, because their duty is to represent the people of Britain, and the people of Britain are paying their bills, are paying them. and so when Prince Andrew settled with Virginia Giuffre an undisclosed sum after he gave that absolute car crash of an interview. And the car crash of the interview, in a way, was his big mistake, because it revealed his mindset, and his mindset was unapologetic and arrogant and out of touch. Not once did he say, I don't really remember Virginia Giuffre, if that were true, but I am so sorry for what's happened. He just came across as entitled and arrogant. And so I think for the Queen to basically say to him, to have him stand back from his duties, that in itself was a big deal, because it meant that he's not fit in his own mother's eyes to act as a representative for the British people. The British taxpayer certainly is not interested in having him on the payroll. So that was in itself a really big deal. But I think that when you saw around the time of Virginia Giuffre's book, the emails come out that showed both he and his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, had blatantly lied. And that what he had said in that interview to the BBC was just not true. He'd said in the interview that he had cut all ties with Jeffrey Epstein when Jeffrey Epstein went to jail, and that he'd just come over to New York in 2010 to say goodbye, to end it. In fact, it turns out that there were emails saying, I've had to apologize. His wife said, I had to apologize, but, I don't really mean it. Andrew is saying to him, I'll be back to play some more. The whole thing was just a charade. And I'm not surprised that King Charles just said enough. because the risk of having somebody like that continue with a title is that it brings the whole family down. And as you know, not everyone in England still thinks that the monarchy is a great thing. And so and King Charles is very cognizant of that, and he's, been slimming down the royal family so that only the people in it who actually really work are the ones on the British taxpayers' payroll. And so he needs this. He needs his brother, like he needs a hole in the head. So it's literally like sending him off to exile in the way that Edward Windsor, King Edward VII, who abdicated the throne to marry Wallis Simpson, was kind of sent off in disgrace. I mean, it's really you can't go much lower if you're
It's it,
Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
and the fact that it was Virginia Giuffre, in death, finally got him. And the fact that it was Queen Elizabeth had to die, allegedly, she was protecting Andrew because, it was her boy. But, we're talking about a cabal of pedophiles, folks. Prince Andrew, who's now just Andrew. Donald Trump, allegedly, right? Larry Summers talking to these people. Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon. We still don't know enough about Leon Black, Leslie Wexner, the prime minister that Virginia Giuffre mentioned. Many people think it could be Ehud Barak. 2 days ago, like I said, Dropsite came out and said Ehud Barak's aide stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's apartment. Totally normal, right? A name I want to ask you about, Ghislaine Maxwell. And it seems, well, folks, if this wasn't a big deal for those who haven't followed the news yesterday, the Trump administration confirmed that they had a meeting in the Situation Room where they talked to Lauren Boebert, where also they had a special meeting where it was Todd Blanche and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi all got together. Donald Trump didn't take any questions about the Epstein files yesterday. He was asked, just ended it. Caroline Levitt was very vague about it, walked away. Uh, if you are innocent or if you have nothing to hide, Vicky, you don't have an emergency meeting with your attorney general and your FBI director and your personal attorney in the attorney general's office. You don't publicly, he did a Truth Social post, bully Republicans and threaten them and tell them not to follow this. You don't wait nearly 2 months to swear in Adelita Grijalva, the Democrat who finally got sworn in yesterday, folks, and promised to vote for the discharge of the Epstein file. You don't call an early recess in August and release the House instead of having a vote, even having a vote on releasing the Epstein files. You don't do any of this stuff, folks. What you do is, I got nothing to hide. The Epstein files were with the DOJ. I release them. There you go. Ha ha, liberal media, egg on your face. That is not what's happening. And what you also don't do is you don't give Ghislaine Maxwell, who was serving a 20-year sentence in Florida for sex trafficking, right? A sweetheart deal that is unheard of, and then give her a transfer to a club-fed minimum security camp in Texas. And I'm sure, Vicky, you've read the leaks that came out this week that she has a service puppy, that the other inmates are just upset about all the special treatment she's getting, that she's getting like special meals, she's doing yoga, and now she wants a commutation of her sentence. I mean, real quick, the Ghislaine Maxwell of it all, to me, is the smoking gun. Like, nobody is asking, why is this woman in friggin' a minimum security camp? Like, why? No, who authorized this? Your take on all this with the Ghislaine of it all and what you heard this week.
Well, talk about being hoist by your own tard, right? I mean, you're right. I think that's a very good way. I mean, for her to have been moved to Club Fed for no reason right after she gives that interview, which, by the way, I mean, what these emails really show is what total bullshit was in her interview to Todd Blanche.
I would say lies, but you were very nice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, absolute. So, yeah, look, I mean, this thing is becoming arguably the biggest political problem, bigger than the shutdown, for Donald Trump. I think, and I've always been skeptical that there was anything in the Epstein files that he needed to worry about. I'm now a lot less skeptical. I now think that, Pat, to your point, the signs are he really doesn't want these files released, which begs the big question, why? I think I would be shocked if he commutes Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence, for the simple reason, if he can play this one in the way he's managed to play everything, if he could somehow get through this unscathed, which is, after all, the Donald Trump way, somehow. What he cares about is his legacy, leaving the White House with a flipping new gold ballroom, and what he cares about, and he isn't going to want even a last minute pardon or commutation of Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence to blemish that. So
See, I disagree. I disagree with that, Vicky. The reason why I disagree with that, let me tell you, and you might be right, we'll see, is number one, I think he's shameless. Number two, when asked about 2 weeks ago about pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell, he was asked specifically about the Insurrection Act, because the Insurrection Act was mentioned by Stephen Miller and also by Pam Bondi, and he said he didn't say no about invoking the Insurrection Act, which already should be friggin' 5-alarm fire. But then they followed up with, well, will you pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? And he goes, huh? Who? Ghislaine? Haven't heard that name in a long time. What? He didn't say no, Vicky. What he said, well, I guess I could, couldn't I? I guess I could. I have the power to do that. The fact that he didn't say no, on camera, and the fact that now Ghislaine got moved after she met with Todd Blanche, and the fact that I think, and you and we've talked about this, she has a lot more. That birthday book, 50th birthday book of Jeffrey Epstein, could have only come from the Maxwell estate. And Ghislaine is sitting there, and if I'm Ghislaine, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not going to spend 20 years of my life in prison. This mother effer just pardoned George Santos. This man just pardoned CZ of Binance, who is his money launderer, a fraudster, who is his business partner. Why should I spend 20 years in prison when I have the goods on him? And he is desperate and he is lying, and something's in there, that to the point where Pam Bondi is now complicit, Mike Johnson's complicit, Kash Patel's complicit, Dan Bongino's complicit. So I don't think Donald Trump cares. I think he'd pardon her. I think he'll pardon her if it means releasing the Epstein files or pardoning her. Both are bad. I think he'd pardon her and then try to spin. But I believe he can't escape it, because, like you said, he has already radicalized his base. And according to the polls, over 75% of Americans, Vicky, Republican, Independent, Democrat, doesn't matter. This is the only thing uniting Americans right now in 2025. That's my take. They want the release of the Epstein files.
Well, it comes down to what kind of dirt does Maxwell really have about Trump that could damage him. I mean, if she has something very damaging, then he would have no reason to commute a sentence, right?
There you go. And to bring it back full circle, folks, look, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, so that's why he's at the top. And also Melania, his wife. I'm very curious about why she's in those photos and how she knew Jeffrey Epstein. I think these are very legitimate questions, and these are questions that should be asked before her Amazon puff piece documentary drops in 2 months, for which Jeff Bezos bribed $40 million, directed by Brett Ratner, also a man accused of massive sexual harassment, just because you can't make this shit up. I think what we're seeing are the world's worst people, just terrible men, Vicky, doing terrible things to girls, getting away with it. And I think this is why I believe we're witnessing the biggest political cover-up in modern history. Wall Street Journal reported that Pam Bondi had told Donald Trump in the spring that he's in the files. Donald Trump then publicly lied about it. Donald Trump tried to sue Wall Street Journal about writing the article about the 50th birthday book. He did sue them. They released the birthday book. The birthday book, folks, if you've seen the photos, it's disgusting. All these men knew this man was a pedophile and they still wrote to him and they drew. You saw the drawings. I'm sure you saw all this, Vicky. It's just disgusting. And like, the names: Leon Black, Ehud Barak, Leslie Wexner, Glenn Dubin. Uh, you know, uh, what's the relationship? What do these people know? And why is Donald Trump so freaked out about this? If he has nothing to hide, just release the Epstein files. And if Virginia Giuffre was lying, uh, Andrew would still be Prince Andrew. He's not. So that's my little takeaway on that one. Vicky, final word to you. And also, please shamelessly promote yourself. And if you don't, I will.
Well, thank you, Waj, for having me on, as always. I'm going to unpack all my thoughts on Vicky Ward Investigates. I want to just go through these files thoroughly, and that is time consuming. And the last word is I'm excited, actually. I am. I think we are on the tip. We're at a tipping point. And I can't wait to see what else emerges. I think it's going to be really important.
It's a really good point. It's the ghosts of the past haunt the criminals of today, and it seems like these girls, uh, they won't be forgotten. And these girls who were seen as property, wouldn't it be something? Wouldn't it be something, Vicky, if these girls who were seen as disposable are the ones who bring down the most powerful men on earth?
Fantastic. It would be wonderful.
Yeah. So inshallah, let's hope. But I agree with you, Vicky. I think there's just too much now. The dam
Yeah.
is cracking. Vicky Ward, Ward Investigates. Please subscribe, everyone. Also, her documentary Chasing Ghislaine, where she was in the courtroom every day and knows Ghislaine Maxwell very well, and her history and her background and her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and also the book To Vicky's Left. The Idaho 4, an American tragedy that came out a couple months ago, was a bestseller, co-written with James Patterson. A really shocking, horrifying story of just young men being radicalized online and how they commit violence. And then she is doing a research for her next book on Luigi Mangione, who is the alleged shooter of the United Healthcare CEO. Thank you, Vicky. Always a pleasure. And also, thank you so much for making time, especially a day after attending the funeral. So I really, really appreciate it. I had no idea. I mean, you told me you were at a funeral. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Vicky Ward, everyone, this is The Left Hook. And folks, I'll be back in about 5 minutes. I'm going to do a complete 180, but to a very important topic. I'm talking to a doctor who is going to talk to you all about the ACA open enrollment, the skyrocketing sticker shocks, and what battleground states can do to protect healthcare price from skyrocketing, especially now that the Democrats caved and have reopened the government without any promise to vote on the extension of Obamacare subsidies. That's happening in about 5 minutes. Important conversation for Americans who want affordable healthcare. Vicky, thanks so much, everyone. Take care. This is The Left Hook. There's no paywalls. If you have some money, go buy Vicky's book. There's a few dollars left over. Become a paid subscriber. I have a whole bunch of kids and cats. But if not, be kind, be informed, and please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Waj.